Okay, Iraq, because this is actually where I think things are going to get fascinating for our viewers because you were there in the first Gulf War and now you're going back, what, 11, 12 years later? But now
Yeah.
you're going back as a member of a tier one tip of the spear unit. When Iraq goes down, when I interviewed Lindsey Bruce, I think he said, I don't remember, he said they came through Jordan, but he said they were in the first convoy and his truck broke down and had to be towed across the border. Do you remember when you kind of find out, okay, like this is real, we're crossing the border, and what your feelings were like, I'm going back into this country that I was just in a little more than a decade ago, fighting the same military I was fighting 11, 12 years ago. What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, it's a bit crazy because I remember but people saying from the first Gulf War when all this bombardment was going off at the night and you could see it, people saying, oh, there's going to be small units of SAS behind enemy lines bringing in the fire and doing all this, that, and the other. I'm like, wow. And then afterwards, there was a boot wrote about it, and you knew that they were behind enemy lines, and it was a full on as if it was how David Sterling did in the Second World War. So then to get involved in that, and suddenly we did go behind enemy lines and get involved in all the rural side of it, and fighting in the desert, doing what the original SAS did. And then we went from there to the urban side, straight into Baghdad, and just doing lots of urban raids and stuff. So it was, I can say, because Lindsay's group, they went across, rolled in on the desert. We actually inserted from a different, we inserted from Saudi. You know, we moved from Jordan, went Saudi from Saudi, and we flew in. So we was like from the first helicopters. I was the second helicopter going across. We had like one vehicle inside a CH-47 inside the Chinook. And it was just like, I hated that though, because after what happened from the first Gulf War, they knew special forces were going to be employed, go in there. So we was told that they were going, anything what was coming, they were going to try and shoot down. So our aircraft, our CH-47s were very low, you know, flying about 50 feet. And to me, just that insertion, waiting, I just want to get it out of that vehicle and on the ground, because literally we got the vehicle in, my head just touching the top of the the top of the roof of the CH-47, because they had that much fuel in there, all the extra fuel and all the kit. And the vehicle was, you couldn't get out of that vehicle. If that vehicle got it, we were just, you just fried. You were just trapped. And we didn't even have all the big guns on because obviously we couldn't fit them on because of the size. So as soon as we got deployed out in the middle of the desert, way behind enemy lines, then the helicopters just left. And then it was like, get them vehicles, get them weapons on quickly. And then it was all silent. And then away we went, did our business. So, yeah. So that's the way we came in.
Well, I didn't realize that there was an SAS element that flew in. That's absolutely, I mean, incredible. You had some guys driving over. I know that a lot of Delta guys left from Saudi Arabia. They drove across the berm as well. Were you told kind of ahead of time, like there's going to be fierce resistance? This could take a year, 2 years to break Saddam's army? Or was the belief once we get in there, these guys are going to give up or they're going to run? What was at the time, obviously not now, at the time, what was the belief of how much resistance you expected?
Well, going tonight, to me, we got told there was going to provide, and because of they from the first Gulf War, they sort of knew special forces tactics. So we knew that it was a brigade supposed to be looking for just special forces in the area. And our job is very much like the same as what the first ones were, you know, trying to stop all the scuds and everything. But we had specific targets, so we knew what we was going in for. And then obviously we went in there behind the enemy lines, and then we just started doing all our own special forces stuff. So it was fantastic. It was what we'd been training up for so long, and we were just you 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 think there was only a very few of you, and we were a small fish in a big pond, but we thought we were invincible because when anything happened, literally the drills were just that good, even though there's a small group of us. And then a lot of the times we got reports back because there was reporting information coming back, and we had certain stuff what I can't talk about now with people involved, and we're stopping people coming out of a certain area, a certain town, and we had people who could speak Arabic with us as well. And some of the people who stopped, they were given this information. They thought there was at least a couple of battalions of us on the ground, and that we told in this one job what we did, well, this ambush, what we was involved in, they thought it was a raid from the air, and it wasn't. It was just what was the amount of ammunition what came from us on the ground. You know, they thought they'd been hit by that much because our drills were just. It's it's amazing what a small group of well-trained people can do, and you just sort of know where each other is, and we knew where each vehicle was, we knew what fight, and it was so even if at night in the darkness, it's bang, and the drill happens. It's like anything. You don't really think what's happening around you. You just drill that much that it's automatic. And again, even though sometimes we found ourselves in big military unit areas, which sometimes we didn't know, and it was like lots, we was like in the middle of an hornet's nest by chance, and it was like craziness. But we got out of there because we were well drilled, whereas the big unit didn't really know what was going on. If you think about it, the further back, these are sort of they aren't special forces, they just their normal military units. It could even be logistics units, and they would all just dug in. And suddenly to get a small group go in there, create havoc, rattle a bee's nest, and then move out. And it's just the morale deflating it is for them. It's amazing. But we've been practicing for this. So it was to me, it was like going to the original David Sterling and how they did it in the desert. Because there's only so much tactics you can do out there. Let's face it. And all this where people think you've automatically got an airplane on call, you haven't. Sometimes the area is completely out of bounds for stop blue on blue and everything, and you can't get air in for a long time. So there were some ballsy calls, but then it went quicker than what we thought, because we thought this time the Iraq would put up a bigger fight. Then suddenly Baghdad was falling, so we got plugged out of there and went straight into Baghdad, and then that was just as it was foul, and it was just so confusing. And yeah, and then this time, so you just gone out from doing lots of desert work behind enemy lines and doing all the rural type of warfare, and suddenly you're in a city, and you just had people saying, right, we know where such and such. They had a pack of cards, and I think Saddam was he was the ace of spades. So you'd have somebody come and say, we know where such and such is and such and such is. So literally, we just go out quickly, and sometimes you just finish a job and then try and get another job. So it was none of this information like before. A lot of jobs you're used to getting a lot of target information, and things can change obviously on the ground, but you know roughly what you're going to be doing. Whereas this, it was just flash to bang. We was inside a vehicle, and it was American vehicles we was with. We was with your armored units, and we jumped in American Bradleys. They would secure the area for us, make a ring of steel, and then we go in do the CQB because we were expert in that. We were used to doing this from the counter-terrorist teams. So we were told where a target was, and you just have to get in there. A lot of times you get there and it'd be the wrong house, or they'd left, or there'd be no targets there. And then sometimes there'd be kids and women there, and then sometimes there would be elements of them there. And then we did catch a fair few of these packer cards. So yeah, so it was then going straight from the rural side in the desert, suddenly you're on the urban side, but just faster bang. It was controlled chaos, but organized chaos, if you know what I mean. Once it goes down, you just drilled.
When you caught guys on the deck of cards, because you talked about how the war criminals, the terrorists, the jihadists, they're scum of the earth. But first off, the deck of cards laid out is a really fascinating piece of history. I know a guy who has the whole thing framed in his office.
Yeah.
But a lot of those guys were their regime officials for
Yeah,
Saddam.
yeah.
So what were they like? Were they more like professional soldiers when they were captured, or were they more like war criminals in their behavior?
No, they were more professional. I've got to say the truth. Like groups of, especially these weren't on the deck of cards. Like when we were doing specific jobs out in the desert, and we were fighting some of the Iraqis. What we were fighting with the Fedayeen, the ones who were really loyal to Saddam, and they did put up a fight. You know, but yeah, on what you're saying there, these were more, they conducted themselves more, most of them, especially the military ones, more professional. They were more military, you know. Um, and then they were part of that regime, weren't they? And let's face it, uh, some of them were, but what a joke. Look at Chemical Ali. Kind of, I just look back on them own. And once we got back and I saw the old footage when he was saying like these no troops anywhere near us, and no, he was still reporting, and he was like chaos going off all around Baghdad, and he was like, no, we're still okay. We're still winning this war.
Baghdad Bob, I think is what he was known as in the U.S., and he turned into
And
like a joke.
he called him Comical Ali, not Chemical Ali, Comical Ali, and yeah.
There's some been reporting that when that guy was caught, a couple of soldiers took photos with him, and he was like smiling with them, like he knew. We're talking about the same person. You're talking about the guy that was like their propaganda guy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like they didn't think the guy was a threat, and they thought it was hilarious because they'd seen him on all the news conference. He claimed that the entire American tanks had all been destroyed in the desert, and they're like literally driving the highway to Baghdad. That guy, talk about a little history lesson. Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you don't even know, but only one person on the deck of cards was never found, right?
I don't know. I don't know exactly. Yeah.
I
Must
think it
admit,
that it
if I caught the propaganda kind of guy, Comical Ali, I think I was maybe pissed myself laughing, if you caught it, because God Almighty.
um was there anything you can talk about because you talked about the Fedi and is did you ever have any engagement in the early days of the Iraq War before while there were still resistance elements of the Saddam regime that you thought to yourself, man, this is starting to get really dicey. Like we might not make it out of this unscathed. Were
Yeah,
there any
yeah, some contacts like that, and it said that they're fed in, but one time they'd be coming out in white pickups, and they were all dressed in black, so they sort of silhouetted themselves a lot more, you know, and they'd be coming for us. Sometimes we'd be out in broad daylight, wanting to come towards us, so we could take them on, and they'd come across, and lots of them in pickups. They'd be coming out with the white SUVs and the white do Dilux, what are they called, Dilux trucks, and they so they have them, but they painted them, not painted them, but they put mud on them, and it's craziness. But they come out on these pickups, and they'd have Duskers, which is the equivalent of a 50 caliber weapon. So they'd have them mounted on the back, but they wouldn't have them mounted properly. So they'd be coming out towards us, and they'd be driving over the desert, firing, and we'd be just static. So the rounds are going all over the place. And then we'd have Milan anti-tank missiles, and we'd have our weapon. And we basically, I remember watching them come toward us, and not after about several of their vehicles got hit, and they carried up, and then they decided this is a bad idea. Let's turn around and go back now. But then next day they came out and tried it again. It's just like suicide. They were just coming towards us. Yeah, so they're a bit crazy. And then there was one time where we saw them on top of this hill, and there was a lot more of them than what we thought. And they got this one guy, and we could actually see him giving his arms up, like as if he says, "Come take us on." And so we just stopped and waited for the air to come. And he was on top of an hill, and it was a couple of hills. And I don't know what happened with their communications, but we could see this one guy, and he's just running from one hill to the top. We lazily, to move 1,400 meters away, so we could see all this with the binos, and it was a standoff. But we were just waiting for the air come. And so they had this one guy, and he was basically saying, "Come take us on." Wow, we know there's an awful lot of you because we actually dug in positions, and we could tell that. So we just waited until the air come, and then basically that guy, the hill he was on was lasered. It was a laser target, and then next minute there was a 500-pounder on top of him, and I was just waiting for see like the Fedi and the little black gown come floating down. But it's amazing because then that bomb dropped, and then they had a couple of bombs drop, and then they moved out. But then after a bit, you see blokes getting up out the trenches and sort of getting all the dust off them. So you know, but yeah, the Fed were a bit crazy.
how long did it take for you guys to realize that foreign fighters were starting to flood into the country? Was it by the end of '03, early 2004, when did you start realizing jihadists were
I reckon
coming?
end of '03, there was already foreign fighters in there straight away. Yeah, I don't know whether they were mercenaries, whether they were recruited in, but yeah. And what got me though, especially this might be moving on, is once I left, I found myself straight back in Baghdad with just a small team of SAS looking after CBS News, and I spent 4.5 years there. So I got to know local Iraqis and everything, and people who was actually in the Republican Guard, these two officers, they were working with us now, so they would have been the enemy. And they just normal Iraqis trying to get in a living, but it just showed you, I saw what a mess we made out there, because it was like there was no end state. We gets in there and it's like, wow, what do we do now? And it's just again getting this hornet's nest, this bee's nest, rattling it, letting them wasp go all over the place, and then right, what do we do now? And so I remember working with these guys over the years, because they used to work for CBS News. Some of them were ex, like I said, ex in the military and whatever, and they were helping CBS News gather information, and being producers, and some of them were engineers, and just helping CBS. And some of them, they hated Saddam. Some of them did with a vengeance. They had family members killed. But over them years working with them, you saw how after a couple of years they're like, wow, I wish Saddam was back, because at least then we could go to kids could go to school. I could go to a market without getting bombed. There was none of this sectarianism, Like Sunni and Shia and Christians all got along as long as you followed that regime. And yeah, he was a tyrant, but look what happened afterwards. It was just chaotic. He had neighbors fighting neighbors, and Sunni fighting Shia, and it was out. And then we sort of just left him to it. And so they actually, after a bit, they were saying, we just wish it was back to normal, back to the old days.